So over the rainbow, I don't care who y'all screw. I keep my own sex life private. Why then, oh why can't you? So, I want to go over two things. The first one being this article, which I think is a parody. It's on this place called, or what's it called? IQFY.com, with such stellar articles as "It Happened to Me, I Become Addicted to Pegging My Husband," and "It Happened to Me, I Made My Sister Believe She Got Molested by Our Uncle." But this particular article is encouraging women to smell their poop to be more inclusive to trans women. Some women have a hole where their penis used to be, and that hole often shares microbiome with the colon, creating a distinct transitioning odor. This is written by Jamie Braunstein. In solidarity with trans women, this month you can make a difference by putting your olfactory system to use while going number 2. While going number and then number 2, or #2. Yes, it's not a joke. We are sincerely asking all women to please spend more time smelling their poo during bathroom breaks and to critically examine what many of our gender have to endure as part of the cost of bottom surgery. It is time for us all to do the work to truly empathize with the sights, sounds, and smells endured by every member of our large and beautiful gender community, including those with distinct transitioning odors. Oh my goodness. There's a link to Microbiome Journal to continue. A big block of text. Based on Graham Stain, the majority of smears revealed a mixed microflora that had some similarity with bacterial vaginosis and that contained various amounts of cocci, polymorphous gram-negative and gram-positive rods, often with fusiform and comma-shaped rods, and sometimes even with spirochetes. Sorry about my pronunciation of all this science lingo. The social taboo around frank discussion of smells. I wonder what those sounds were that was mentioned earlier. The social taboo around frank discussion of smells is already quite strong, but doubly so when it comes to the ones that can come from MTF neovaginas. If you are a regular on advice and trans subreddits, you know you usually don't have to wander too far down the feeds before coming across anonymous posts carefully prodding for advice on neovaginal smells, like this one. One night, I was going to go down on her, so she washed her bits before she came in the bedroom, and she laid on my bed. I was about a few inches from her face when I noticed a foul smell that I can best describe as stale urine, cheesy, and a bit like feces. I've heard of post-op MTF smells, but I've read most people saying that they go away quickly after transition. Anyway, I backed away because I was so put off by that smell. She kept asking what's wrong, and I finally broke down and told her what was wrong. She was confused and kept smelling herself, saying she didn't smell anything. She said she just washed it, too. It's been a fight between me and her, and she's self-conscious about it. I asked if it could be an infection or her hygiene habits, lifestyle, or diet, because I know those things can affect the smell of the vagina. She told me that's just the way her vagina and all vaginas smell. She told me it didn't smell like what I described it as, and it just smelled like a vagina. I tried asking my mother about what it could be, and she couldn't give me any answers because she's not informed on this topic. I tried asking my gay cousin, but she didn't have any answers either. I was wondering if anyone in here could give me some advice on this. Do transgender women just have a different smell down there than cis women? Is that just her natural smell? If so, what can I do to get used to the smell? It's interesting. There's a bit of gaslighting there. Like, no, it doesn't. It smells like any other vagina. It totally smells like every other vagina. It totally does. It doesn't smell different at all. It doesn't. It's just another vagina. Okay. But to continue with the article, but before we get to the cultural impact and science of unique genital scents, Equify, Common Vaginal Smells and Their Meaning Explained, there's a link there, read on to learn about the sad story that sparked a poovolution in a Canadian public school. As I was transitioning, I found it triggering that my cisgender female friends didn't smell like poo. The top of the fateful note read, it had arrived by the Trans Express. That's what they call it there. The relatively small but respected Canadian school had just set up an anonymous tip box for LGBTQ folks to alert the faculty to issues faced by their community. It was a lavender wooden box decorated with cheery handwriting, plastic flowers, and other colorful accoutrements, discreetly placed by the janitor's closet near the main bathrooms. 3 times a week, the woman describing herself as the school's trans mama bear ceremoniously poured its heart-rending contents out onto the table in the faculty lounge. So unfortunately, it's a subscription feature. You have to log in to read the rest. Again, I don't know if that's parody or not, but I do know that this isn't parody. So Matt Walsh, he works for Daily Wire. He has produced and recently uploaded and distributed this documentary called What is a Woman? There's clips flying around it. A lot of people are macking on the attention that is put upon this issue, and some of them just by reviewing that film and getting tons of views reviewing that film, and then other people wish they were in that film. This is really interesting phenomena where a lot of the gender critical feminist folks are wondering, well, why didn't Matt Walsh ask us what's going on? He basically says he's not interested. But the Women's Declaration USA, who does a lot of work that I agree with and support about shoring up the legislative laws around, let's say, men in women's prisons, and other legislation that puts women at risk, they released a statement about Matt Walsh's movie. Matt Walsh's new film, What is a Woman, produced by the Daily Wire, is in some ways a valuable contribution to the bipartisan movement to fight back against the inclusion of so-called gender identity in law and throughout society. It is also a celebration of sex stereotypes. Matt Walsh clearly loves sex stereotypes. The first few minutes of the film consist of a practically orgasmic celebration of girls liking pink, dolls, and glitter, and boys liking blue, trucks, and guns. It ends with his wife, clad in a bathrobe and washing the dishes in the kitchen, stating that a woman is an adult human female and asking for his help in opening a jar of pickles. He goes on to open the jar, clearly quite impressed with his own virility. The film does one thing really well. It exposes the absurdity of the fact that no one seems to be able to define what a woman is. Walsh does this with humor and insight. His on-the-street interviews with strangers are a mixed bag. Most likely, a lot of the people he encounters don't have any idea why he is asking what is a woman, because they are not enmeshed in the gender wars. Many of them seem to be genuinely surprised and not to understand the point of the question, but many of them answer along the lines of, a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. And part of this project's worthy aim is to expose this absurdity. Walsh does a spectacular job in his interviews with so-called experts on topics like sex and gender, and the moment the congressperson ends the interview and walks out is brilliant. The film does something else well that exposes the lies and the horrors of child transition, quote unquote. Our society, our laws, and our medical establishment are actively engaged in a eugenics project. We are mutilating and sterilizing children. We are all horrified about that and glad that he exposed this vicious industry for what it is. No one has done more to expose the industry than the 11th Hour blog, but nonetheless, the more light that is shed on this travesty, the better. The 11th Hour blog, that's by Jennifer Bilek, who's been writing about this issue quite fervently for some time. To continue, much ado has been made on social media about Walsh's failure to interview any radical feminists for the project. Many women are very angry that he appears to present himself as a savior in this fight, when women, feminists especially, have been fighting back against the movement to abolish sex for years. We understand this criticism and respect it. Wait, what? We understand this. Wait, no, you are joining in this criticism, but, where did the idea of separating sex from gender come from? To continue, one might object by asking, but wait, how do you know that Walsh even knew about the radical feminist objections to quote-unquote gender identity? We know because when WDI USA President Karadanski's book, The Abolition of Sex, How the Transgender Agenda Harms Women and Girls, was published in November of 2021, the book publicist repeatedly requested interviews with both Walsh and the Daily Wire. The requests were all ignored. Well, then how do you know that he knew what was in the book? I guess the email was read, but he might have assistance. Or maybe he just didn't care. So I guess he knew. When Kara brought this to Walsh's attention several months ago on Twitter, Walsh engaged with her and responded that his podcast format does not lend itself to interviews. Fair enough, but Walsh can't now say that he didn't know about us when he went about creating this film. We think that there is a much bigger problem with Walsh's intentional omission of radical feminist voices, though. It is not that we need Walsh to appreciate the contributions of feminists, even though that's what you're saying. He doesn't, and we know that. Seems like you want it, though. None of us particularly cares what he thinks of feminists. That's not quite true either. We already know that he dismisses us, okay? Further, feminists are not angry because their egos got hurt. Can't prove that, but let's just assume it's true. None of us is interested in fame for fame's sake. The problem with this statement is that they are assuming that they're speaking for all feminists. To continue, many of us would likely be thrilled to win this battle and then shrink off into obscurity. Shrink? To live out the rest of our lives on the beach or in the mountains. The problem, this is in bold, the problem with Matt's failure to include radical feminist voices is that it is a terrible political strategy. The fight against the gender industry, what the 11th Hour blog calls the techno-medical complex, consists of lots of diverse players with different viewpoints and values. That's a good thing. It is well known that radical feminist groups like WDI USA are comfortable working with conservative organizations when it is strategic to do so, and it often is. WDI USA has accomplished a lot by working with conservative organizations, especially women's groups like the Independent Women's Forum and Concerned Women of America, who understand the strategic importance of highlighting leftist, radical feminist voices in this fight. So they do want attention. These groups understand this. If this political battle consists of the big bad Christian right versus a marginalized group of trans people, women are going to lose. They understand that they need our voices if we collectively are going to win. Matt either doesn't or won't grasp this. So if I get them correct, the way to defeat the trans agenda or the gender ideology that is spreading through schools and other institutions is a coalition of diverse political perspectives, so that you don't just create the story of the radical Christian right or the hardcore Christian right against this little marginalized group. So you spread out the blame on who's against this marginalized little group. The more the merrier. But if you don't work together, then it's going to be easy to say that anyone who's standing for the oppression or the genocide of this small little medical minority, I wonder if that's taken, is just the Christian right, then the liberal, the centrist, will want to back away from any criticism of this issue. To continue, we understand the value of this film and exposing things that need to be exposed. We also think that the key demographic in winning this political battle are going to be mainstream liberals who are still in the dark about the dangers of gender identity because the media keeps them there in the dark to gender identity. Most mainstream liberals quickly see through the absurdity of gender identity once it is pointed out to them. We also think that approximately 0 of them, those mainstream liberals who are currently in the dark with regards to gender identity, are going to be persuaded by or even know about a film produced by The Daily Wire featuring a known Christian conservative traditionalist that omits the leftist feminist critique of gender ideology or identity entirely. Many men, including Walsh, know what a woman is because they know exactly upon whose neck to place their boots. We would welcome the opportunity to talk with them, these men who like to stand on the necks of women, to see if they can be persuaded that they need radical feminist voices if they want to win. Till then, they aren't helping. While we were composing this statement, Walsh tweeted this offer to join forces with anyone to bring down gender ideology. WDI USA President Karadanski tweeted this in response. We'll see if he makes good on his offer. So these are the tweets that Matt writes and that Karadanski responds to. Matt Walsh writes, I will join forces with anyone to bring down gender ideology. The gender cult is a clear and present danger to women, children, men, and civilization itself. I will work with any ally in the fight to destroy it. I've been very clear about this. And then Dansky replies, great, let's talk. To date, you have pretty much ignored us. Please see if you can get me on the DW podcast, Daily Wire. Even better, see if you can get us both on a free platform to talk about how this all went down. You can find us here at WDI USA. And then this is just a bunch of the chatter that's going on underneath these sorts of tweets. So I'm just going to read a little conversation here that shows you the political genius of the radical feminist community. So Michael responds, this guy named Michael Methesis responds to Karadanski, have you sent them an email or DM? It seems strange to publicly do this repeatedly on different profiles. If you want your work recognized, approach people privately and in good faith, and maybe it will happen. That this isn't the way. And then I stand with Amber Heard, beaver and banana symbol, or nose, or rocket. You can never tell with that particular symbol. You're just mad that he, meaning Matt, can't ignore her, meaning Dansky, or Kara, without looking like a liar now. Aren't you, Michael? And then Michael responds, not at all. I'm not in this for male-female brownie points. Just want to protect my kids and everybody else's kids, just like Scott said. This is issue number 1. And then grown tomboy, this is the best, then back off and let women handle what's right or not about the approach. You just want nice, and we are way over your mansplaining crap. What have you done to protect children in a large and meaningful public way? So it's like, they just want attention so much. It's so weird. It's like, men know what women are because they step on women's necks with their boots. That's the definition that we think men hold for women. And yet they still feel like they're not getting enough attention. They're not centered in men's work. They need to be front and center. But they dislike men. They think that men are their oppressors, and yet they are going and begging men for attention, or at least prodding him for attention. And, it seems like they want Matt Walsh to be Benjamin Boyce. That's the long and the short of it. They want somebody who will listen to them at length, ask probing but not too intense questions about their ideology in order for them to get their message out. And Matt Walsh isn't playing that game, but he's getting a lot more attention than Benjamin Boyce. Matt Walsh is front and center. He's been trending on Twitter for days on end now. Benjamin Boyce is nowhere to be found, but he's done all this work of speaking to all these voices. Something similar happened a couple weeks ago when Chris Rufo went on Tucker Carlson and he wrote on Twitter, the gender ideology movement has secured millions in taxpayer funding to promote puberty blockers, double mastectomies, prosthetic genitalia, and bizarre sexual fetishes to children. And then Kara Dansky jumps on this tweet from Chris Rufo. It's getting a lot of attention. And she says, Chris, you've been getting quite a bit of flack on here for jumping into this space without realizing that women have been at this for years. Here's my book in case you want to check it out, and retweet. That would actually be very helpful. And then Chris Rufo responds to Kara, I actually haven't been getting flack, and I certainly don't believe I need permission from feminists to report on gender. My reporting follows my curiosity and nothing else. And frankly, those of you who have been at this for years have done nothing but lose ground. Like all this infighting or all this like bickering on Twitter between the radical feminists and the conservative men. It's silly. And it shows the extent of the radical feminist critique. This is the problem. It's always been my problem with the radical feminist critique or the ideology is that it's always playing the victim. Their definition of a woman is that who is oppressed. Like happened a couple years ago when I went up and I saw Kara Dansky and Megan Murphy up in Seattle, and they gave a talk at a public library that was protested by a bunch of trans rights activists. The trans rights activists accused these women of working on behalf of patriarchy to suppress the trans minority, and they worked themselves up into a frenzy and hollered and screamed at women, pushed old women around, to prove the point of how oppressed they are. And then inside that event, the women kept on talking about how the trans rights activists are working on behalf of patriarchy to oppress women. Like it's all oppression all the time. And victimology is, I guess it's useful for getting your way in certain limited contexts within certain games. By which I mean getting policy instituted in law, rights-based policy instituted in law to protect women. You need to, in order for these protections to be instituted, you need to make a case that they need to be there, and therefore you say, well, these women are vulnerable, or this class of people is vulnerable. That's one tact to get what you want out of government. And so the critical feminist theories are attenuated to doing certain work, but their assumption of seeing women always as the victim and men always as the victor or the oppressor, knowing what a woman is by putting his boot against her neck, that has very, very limited scope to actually facilitate people getting along, facilitate a healthy relationship between the sexes, and facilitate mutual understanding, because it's not all power. And if it is all power, then you can't always be playing the victim and expect especially conservative men who don't believe in this crap to fall for that ploy. So essentially I just think it's fascinating to watch the conservative men do their thing and the radical feminists do their thing, which they've always been doing, calling themselves victims and wanting a seat at the table, when the internet is such that what you need to do is produce good content. First and foremost, going around and trying to get other people to pay attention to you or clout chasing is a weak position. You need to make a strong argument and a strong platform yourself. Chris Rufo, self-starter. Cara Dancy, self-starter. She's doing a lot of work. And Matt Walsh, self-starter in the Daily Wire crowd. These people are all non-mainstream media personalities that built up their platforms by just working really, 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 really hard. And some get ahead of others. Maybe that's the patriarchy at work, but the women look weak when they appeal to men's attention. That's what I'm trying to say. That's all I have. I will check you later. Here's a couple of cool cats.